Welcome to Mission Imperfect, the podcast about finding your own path, your own way, and embracing the imperfection of the journey.
We're your hosts, life coaches, former HR professionals, and mums, Kirsty and Catherine.
We love to discuss the topics that come up time and time again for our coaching clients and which affect us all, from things like acceptance and boundaries to values and well-being and everything in between.
Each episode ends with a question for you and us to reflect on. Your mission, should you choose to accept it, is to grab a cuppa and a biscuit and join us in getting lost in finding ourselves.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Mission Imperfect. This week we have a slightly different topic for you. We are going to be talking about introversion. And Kirsty, this was your idea, so I'm going to hand over to you to take it away and share some of your thoughts on introversion, because I think this is something that you personally identify with, isn't it?
Oh, very much so, very much so. And yeah, as you say, it is a bit different to our usual topics, isn't it? Because I think so far we've been talking about things that sort of can apply universally. Everyone's got some connection to it in some way. And I'm guessing there are a lot of people who may well go, introversion, that's nothing to do with me. But we can all relate to the introversion-extroversion spectrum somehow. We're on that somewhere. And as I identify as introvert, I obviously tackle it from the introvert end. And I think that's probably the end that is least understood. And for me, knowing more about it has really been huge. I mean, I know we both have a bit of an issue with the whole idea of transformation and the word transform, but I do feel that this is one area that did feel quite transformative and in a really quite practical way, because it's given me a much better understanding of myself and my needs and how to manage them. And it was when I came across Susan Cain's book, which is called Quiet, The Power of Introverts in a World That Can't Stop Talking. That was when I started to understand so much more about what introversion is and what it means to be one. And yeah, we love a dictionary definition. And if you look up introversion, the dictionary generally talks about it as a preference for the inner life of the mind over the outer world of other people. And that rings very true, but it also feels a little bit sort of superficial. Most people like a good think now and then, right? But what Susan Cain has highlighted for me is sort of what's going on behind that, because introversion and extroversion are about what gives you energy and what drains you energy. So introversion means that your energy is drainably. I can speak. Let me put my teeth in just a minute. Your energy is drained by external stimuli, such as socializing, for instance, being around other people. Whereas extroverts are going to find those external stimuli energizing. So introverts need quiet time alone to recharge their energy, whereas extroverts prefer sort of busier, noisier, more full-on environments to recharge. And not understanding this leads to that sort of general misconception that introverts are necessarily shy and quiet and antisocial. And whereas that can be true for a lot of introverts, hello, but it isn't necessarily true. I mean, an introvert can be the life and soul of the party. You could have a big night out with an introvert and extrovert, vying to be that life and soul of the party. But the difference is, at the end of the night, the extroverts can be, oh my God, that was amazing, let's do it again tomorrow. The introverts go, oh my God, that was amazing, let's do it again next month. Is that need to recharge energy after socializing for the introvert, whereas the extrovert has been energized by the socializing.
It makes so much sense. I have to be honest, I was one of the people that this wasn't really a term I concerned myself with that much. Out of pure curiosity, I have looked into it a little bit before, because I'm one of these people that thinks a lot of things aren't really black and white. There is often a nice grey middle ground. Obviously, as coaches, we are very aware of a lot of grey middle grounds that go on in life. And I wasn't so much aware of this idea of it being the energy source or how it drains your energy. And yet it makes perfect sense to me now. And yet it's a bit of a funny one. I can't imagine, and this is probably giving away some of my introvert traits now, I can't imagine being only able to find my energy in those high octane type environments. And I love socializing, but I wouldn't be able to do it sort of like relentlessly. I guess that shows some introvert traits that I must have, because I think surely the very nature for me of recharge, I'm almost thinking of like, plugging yourself in like a power pack, is it's a bit of a solitary, quiet time. It seems strange to me that it would. I do get the idea, I suppose, that you do get a bit of a buzz out of socializing with people, but I definitely couldn't just do that on repeat. Not since my uni days, perhaps.
Yeah, whereas there are people who, the idea of being on their own is quite scary. It fills them with dread. They don't know how to handle that. And again, like you, I find that quite hard to really relate to, because I would consider myself definitely the more introverted end of the scale. And I think it is a scale, it's a spectrum. There are very few people who are 100% one thing or 100% the other. Very few, if any. But it's that when the chips are down and you're feeling knackered, are you going to choose to hang out with your favorite people, or are you going to choose time alone? I guess might be a good way of understanding which end of the spectrum you're closest to.
Oh yeah, I think we can probably all think of a couple of people that might be swaying more to one end than the other. So I think, for example, my husband would he's probably more introvert than I am. I think he would probably agree. And yet my sister's husband is one of the most extrovert people I can think of. He's sort of life and soul. I think the only time he's quiet is when he's asleep. If I'm being really honest, he's a real kind of always doing something, always with other people. So yeah, they're really quite opposite. I think we can probably all recognize those kind of traits, and maybe a lot of us feel comfortable somewhere in the middle where we can dip into either of those things from time to time. And I think that's where I sit. But I think what was really interesting, and the reason why you've called this episode Introversion, is because we really wanted to focus on this end of the scale, didn't we? And your thoughts on which I found really enlightening, about society being more geared towards extroversion. And my immediate thought was, oh, is it? And then when you put some of the thinking behind this, I thought, oh my God, you're absolutely right. So do share with us your thoughts on that, because I think this is some great insights for people.
Yeah, I think, and again, it was Susan Cain's book that sort of made me so much more aware of this. But I think it's especially in Western cultures. I think there are some particularly sort of Asian-oriented cultures that are probably, from what I understand of them, perhaps more geared towards introversion. But sort of Western European cultures tend to be much more geared towards extroversion. You've got, it starts at school and nursery even, and you've got the group activities and learning that we all have to participate in. We've got open plan offices in most working environments. We've got the assumption that everybody loves a good night out as the best way of socializing. And there's this whole thing around loners. I mean, loners are generally considered to be at least seriously weird and quite possibly serial killers, rather than, just somebody who happens to be comfortable and at ease in their own company, which surely is a good thing.
Yeah. That's such a valid point, isn't it? And yet I can kind of see, just going back to the examples of schools and offices, I suppose you can see the kind of thinking behind some of that is like learning to get on with other people, learning to share, for example, for children, and perhaps learning to get on with your colleagues and compromise and negotiation and all those kinds of things. But you're right, it doesn't have to be that everyone loves a good night out with all of the crowd. It can be managed and obtained through smaller groups and other means. So yeah, I wonder. I mean, I have to say, I guess I'm fortunate enough that I've never felt sort of really out of place in big group settings. What I would probably do is just gravitate towards the people that I knew better, and not. I probably wouldn't be the one, holding the limelight in the middle, doing some funky moves, for example. But I guess that would be my way of negotiating that setting that might be more geared towards extroversion.
Absolutely. And yeah, I'm not suggesting that these are necessarily bad things, but it's just understanding, because the more introverted you are, the more all of that external stimulation is going to be draining for you. So at the more extreme end of the introversion scale, simply walking into an open plan office and being there with all the noise and the bustle and the conversation, that is draining. So you're starting at a disadvantage. Your day in the office is more exhausting than that of an extrovert. And similarly in the classroom, children who are naturally more introverted are probably going to find simply being in the classroom more draining than their more extrovert classmates. And I think it's interesting that sort of during lockdown, there were stories of children who really thrived through that more solitary learning environment where they could just be on their own, where they actually felt they had more sort of private access to teachers to ask questions and have conversations rather than having to do it in a group setting. And lots of kids actually benefited from that, just as lots of kids really, really struggled with being alone and cut off from others. There isn't a one size fits all, and it's not a case of good or bad. It's about understanding that for a good chunk of us, I couldn't find any data about how many people are estimated to be introverts in the UK. But there are a chunk of us who find the general setup more exhausting than others.
Yeah.
But
that's
no,
a really interesting
no recognition
point.
is given to that.
Yeah, well, that's exactly what I was just thinking when you said there aren't perhaps the statistics out there, because I think it's probably perceived as more of a preference and a bit more, almost lightweight, shall I say. I'm not saying that it is, but the perception might be that it's not like a diagnosis of something that's, as we know, that can impact learning, for example, that there might be adjustments for and that kind of thing. I don't think it's perhaps maybe yet. Who knows what the future might hold? Because I think it's really interesting to identify that if it is draining for you up front and potentially putting you on a bit of a back foot, well, it's not really fair, is it?
No, as long as can you make an environment fair for everybody and every preference? You probably can't. But an awareness that some people might be at a disadvantage and allowing for that can be done in most situations. It's like in meetings, there is an expectation that, people are going to speak up with their thoughts and ideas the minute a subject is raised. But introverts, again, are far more likely to want to process things inwardly before they start giving their opinions. They're more likely to think before they speak, whereas an extrovert is more likely to speak in order to think. And when you're in an environment, and whether it's a classroom or a meeting, where you're put on the spot and you're asked that question, you're expected to be participating and coming up with stuff from the get-go, introverted children and employees are often criticized for not speaking up enough. And that's, if managers and teachers were more aware of this, perhaps, and are more willing to sort of seek feedback from them in a different way and allow them that time, then everybody would probably feel a bit better about what was going on.
Yeah.
So all of that, the fact that, so much of how we operate is geared towards extroversion. And then there's that kind of criticism for not being able to operate in that way when you don't fit in. And it means a lot of introverts can feel very other, just in terms of going about their daily business, that they seem to be more exhausted than everybody else. They're the ones who are struggling to speak up in meetings when you should be able to do it. Mm-hmm. And that can be quite hard to contend with. It can knock your ability to sort of trust yourself and feel accepted. Things that we've already talked about at some length.
Yes, and are important to us. Let's be honest. We're all seeking a degree of acceptance, aren't we? And we're big fans of you being accepted as who you are, not that you need to be something different. So with that in mind, let's talk a little bit about the benefits of knowing, perhaps if you are thinking, I do identify myself as perhaps more introverted, perhaps where can they look to find out more about this and understand what that might mean for them, and what can be done to perhaps not put them at that disadvantage that we've spoken about.
Okay, well, if you think you might be an introvert, I mean, a lot of it, is there an official diagnosis? I don't think there is. Susan Cain on her website, I did write that down, so we'll put it in the notes, obviously.
Yeah,
her website is susancain.net, and that's Cain, Cain. And she's got a quiz on there, which, you answer some questions and it gives you an idea of where you might be on that introversion, extroversion scale. But when you understand that, what's the point in understanding that? Well, I think it does a brilliant job of explaining the sense of tiredness and of otherness that I certainly felt for most of my life. For instance, social situations, I can and do enjoy socializing. I would often find that I was very quickly tired, and I would hit the wall, and I would feel myself shutting down. And I thought that was just me being weird. And now I recognize, no, that's just my energy being drained. And I used to try and force myself through that and think there was something wrong with me. So, and again, you mentioned your brother-in-law who's always on the go, always doing something, always around people, always talking. I used to feel tired just thinking about that.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, he's like the Duracell bunny, but there is definitely there's no running out. He just keeps going. Like I said, I think sleep is the only quiet time.
And that's quite an extreme example, but even sort of less extreme examples than that, I would catch myself thinking, I don't know how they do it. There must be something wrong with me. And so, no, we're just different. And that leads on to, once you have that sort of explanation, you can see yourself more positively and stop feeling, or at least reduce that sense of being other, that you're a bit weird, that you're doing it wrong somehow. And then in a very practical way, you can start finding ways to manage your energy in a way that works for you, and to actually really enjoy the socializing, to do it far more on your terms, and to find ways of making it better for you. Because introverts are not complete loners. Every human being has a need for connection. And even your most extreme introvert will have a need for some form of connection. So it's not that an introvert cannot enjoy socializing and won't enjoy socializing. It's finding the right way for you as an individual to do that and manage your energy around it. And once you start understanding that about yourself, I have found it really useful in creating better understanding with less introverted family and friends. My husband is less introverted than I am. He presents very well as an extrovert, but I think he is surprisingly introverted when we start talking about it in his preferences, but not as introverted as I am. So it really helped. I mean, we talk now about peopling and depeopling. If I say I people too much, he knows what I mean. He knows I need that downtime. And again, if there are social occasions that really matter to him, he lets me know that, so that, and if it's not so important to him that I'm around, he'll let me know that too, and I can make decisions that allow me to be most present and most energized, when he wants me around and to participate, and he's happy to let me take the step back at other times when I need to go away and sort out my energy. And that's been really useful.
Yeah. So it sounds like you said, it's not about not being sociable at all, because I think you're absolutely right. There is a need for connection, but it just might be on that smaller scale, might be in a slightly more intimate setting or regularity. There are different ways in which it might present itself and work for people, depending on quite how introverted they feel and quite how it expresses itself. So I think it's really insightful to think that there are ways that it's still absolutely manageable to have those social settings without it being like a you know, I'm literally seeing the sort of, when you were talking about your energy draining, I was literally seeing the little red line, 1% left, like nothing else to give. Yeah, exactly. Without it reaching that point, I think that's the crucial thing. Like if you're aware, then perhaps you can avoid or try to mitigate it getting to that sort of dangerously low, going to shut down part. Yeah.
I mean, I used to be, in all honesty, I used to use alcohol a great deal with hindsight, I know I was reaching that point. The energy was draining in a social situation. Everybody else was still going strong. My way of getting through it used to be to have a few more drinks to try and give myself the boost I needed. Whereas now I've got that sense of the battery going down, almost exactly that. It's okay, that's where I am. And I need to do something to remove myself from this situation now.
I think also might be a sign of, well, I was going to say this for me anyway, Kirsty, for age. I used to be able to drink and I'm like, woohoo, off I go again. Now I'm like, I have a drink, I just, my eyelids start to droop.
I need to go to sleep.
Like the energy bar just goes bump straight down. Yeah, it has the opposite effect these days.
It's interesting, like you said earlier, when you're in a big group, you tend to gravitate toward sort of carving out a smaller group from that for yourself to work with. And that is a very introvert thing, that preference for the small group or the one-to-one socializing. Again, if you can recognize that and do more of that rather than the big groups, that helps manage my energy levels very well too.
Yeah.
So it's just, I mean, like everything we talk about, understanding your own patterns and needs makes such a difference in how you can then choose to show up in and experience your own life, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll put the link in below so people can have a look at this quiz, and you can find various sources about this. I can't remember the one I did some time ago, but it kind of actually showed you a bit of a scale, and I remember it sort of said you're at the extroverted end of the introversion part. So I thought, okay, that's quite nice. I probably sat somewhere in the middle, but slightly tipped in favor of the introversion part. And I think that actually does make sense, and that does reflect me. So I think if you have a look at some of these resources, you can find some things out. We have got a question for you, but just before we get stuck into that, let's share some quotes on introversion, because I think you found some great ones here.
Yeah, I didn't actually go looking for quotes that used the word introversion, but a great one from Stephen Hawking: quiet people have the loudest minds. And you know, when you're feeling a little bit othered by that whole introvert thing, that's a nice one to give you a little bit of a boost, I think.
Yeah, and I bet you love this one. I'm thinking you're going to say you agree with this one. It says you might be an introvert if you were ready to go home before you left the house, which I just think is a great way of putting it. It's like you've not even got the foot out the door and you want to go back in.
Sometimes that's how I get myself out the door, by promising myself how nice it will be when I get back in and allowing myself to look forward to that.
Something to look forward to. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, even Lord Byron, who I don't know very much about him, but I sort of had it in my head that he was a major party animal. And he says, I only go out to get me a fresh appetite for being alone. And it's that sort of reminder that of the good parts of being alone when you're an introvert.
Yeah, absolutely. And that kind of rings true of this one. My alone feels so good. I'll only have you if you're sweeter than my solitude, which is quite nice, isn't it? It's like, it doesn't have to be. Yeah. It's nice, isn't it? It's a bit like, actually, my alone time is nice. I don't have to gate crash it with other things if it doesn't feel.
Yeah, I mean, it's
like, yeah.
So many people are not at ease in their own company, and I think it's really healthy to be able to be at ease in your own company. Not all the time.
Yeah, I actually think you might have stumbled on something that's really quite valid there, because obviously introverts, I think, are more at ease in their own company. I actually think and can manage the more sociable stuff. I know it's maybe the odds are a bit more stacked against you when you talk about those open learning environments and offices and those kind of things. And yet, surely when you're older, I think if you aren't comfortable in your own skin, in your own company, I think that's actually a more tricky thing to manage and to be aware of. So it's making me feel actually more happy that I'm on probably the slightly more introverted side, because I think it must be that, you're stuck with yourself, right? There's no escaping you. You're going to be there
24/7.
Yeah, exactly. So not perhaps being okay with your own company, I think, is actually a bit more of dangerous territory. Do you agree?
Very much so. And I don't think there's necessarily a direct correlation between being an introvert and being okay in your own company. I think you are probably more likely to be okay, but I guess I don't want to suggest that there are introverts who don't struggle with their own thoughts.
Yes, of course.
And obviously coaching can really help with that. But an introvert is perhaps more likely to want to have that time alone, and perhaps to find that struggle with their own thoughts harder because it interferes with that, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it absolutely does. Yeah, and I wasn't suggesting there was an absolute correlation, but it just highlighted that thought for me. And of course, as coaches, we spend a lot of time talking to people, extrovert or introvert or ambivert, wherever they may be, about being okay with yourself, because that is so important. It just occurred to me, I would hate to almost think I have to fill up my time and energy with others because I don't like what I have when I'm on my own. And that was just something that it kind of highlighted for me. I wonder if that is ever a struggle or an issue. So
I'm pretty sure it is. That's a brilliant insight. And if you're an introvert that I can't cope with my own thoughts, that they're too harsh on me, whatever it is. And so trying to escape with other people, which in turn is draining. That's
even worse. Yeah. Yeah.
Nasty,
wow. Well, we've opened Pandora's box, Kirsty, haven't we? Well, what we thought was going to be a very short and sweet discussion, but actually it's quite an interesting one. So let's end with our question, which is going back to that really key point about the energy source, isn't it?
Yeah, just to sort of hopefully tune into a bit of self-awareness and finding of ways forward. But so the question is, regardless of how much you enjoy it, does socializing drain you or energize you? And if it drains you, how do you cope with that? And if it energizes you, how do you cope with time alone?
It's a great question. And I'm going to give a typical, I was going to say a politician's answer, but no, I refuse to say that. I'm going to say a coach's answer, which for me...
Or an ambivert answer?
Sorry?
Or an ambivert answer, perhaps?
It's an ambivert answer, yeah, which is, to be honest, I do find it can energize me, but it absolutely will depend on who it's with. And I have noticed, truthfully, it's probably going to be a smaller group than a much larger group that I would find that that's the case for. But yeah, I'm a bit of one of those people that I wouldn't want to be doing it back to back all the time. I'm very much okay with there being that downtime in between. So I say, yes, it can energize me, I think, more so than drain me. But that's probably because I know I wouldn't then sandwich it together straight away with something else. There would be that kind of calmness in between. I'm not someone who has to have things back to back. In fact, I find that stressful if I don't have any kind of window to kind of decompress. That's what I call it. In between, I find that I'll forget things anyway, or it just becomes a bit too frantic for me. I'm not the kind of person, for example, who'd come straight back from holiday and then be straight out that day doing something. It's just like, no, I've got to just be at home and just calmness before the next thing lifts off again. Yeah.
That sounds like a pretty good balance, actually.
I'd like to think so. I mean, obviously, I don't necessarily always get it right, but that's why probably I've not been that tuned in to this topic, because I think I do navigate a middle ground quite well, and because I think I can dip into either side a bit more easily. I don't find it too much. I don't want to jinx myself here, but I don't find it too much of a struggle. And I wonder if some people might identify with that, but I reckon they might identify they do have some tendencies in either way, because when I did the quiz, I hadn't done it before. It was quite interesting for me. Some of the things I was like, oh yeah, I can definitely see that leaning more in the introvert direction, for example. So, but what about you, Kirsty? Give us your thoughts.
Well, the socialising, I can and I do enjoy socialising, but it definitely drains me. I'm definitely tired afterwards, even when I've really enjoyed it. And, I've mentioned my go-to coping mechanism to get me through it always used to be just a few more drinks. Never ended well. But now, I just use the word in terms of what you said. Now it's about finding my own balance between the peopling and the depeopling. So making sure I get the quiet time ahead of a big social occasion and recovery time afterwards, being able to plan that recovery time and know that I've got it coming really helps. And, I've stopped beating myself up for being happy on the periphery of things or in my own company. It's not, I was going to say it's not weird. Some people probably do find it weird, but it isn't in itself weird. It's who I am, and I'm not the only one. I think that understanding my introversion really helped with that. It's not just me. And I'm honest with others, with those that matter to me. I'm honest about if I'm peopled out and something feels like too much. I am much more honest about that now, and I feel better for it, because then I can be fully present and properly engage when it matters and enjoy it.
Brilliant. I love the word depeopling. I'd never heard that before. I think you might have invented it, Kirsty, but I think it's a great word, and I think it should absolutely go in the dictionary. So I hope that was helpful for everybody. Do have a look at that little quiz, and hopefully you'll have taken something away from today about this idea of introversion and extroversion, actually, and what that means for you, and how to maybe be aware of that to your advantage, because I think that's actually what we're all about. It's not about changing who you are, because these are preferences that are probably quite inbuilt, aren't they? It's not saying, become the extrovert of the party. That's how to do it. That's not the answers that we're about. So hopefully you'll find this one useful, and do join us again soon for another episode.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of Mission Imperfect.
Please visit the show notes for details on how to contact us and for any resources we may have on the topic discussed.
Until next time, keep being imperfectly you. No one does it better.